Rashad Robinson joins me now live. He is the president of Color of Change, the nation's largest online racial justice organization. Rashad, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for having me.
So, Rashad, I want to go ahead and start right here with your reaction to that Department of Justice report. What do you make of its impact, and was it surprising at all?
Well, it wasn't surprising, and I think its impact still remains to be seen. We've seen reports like this on other cities. The work begins now, and in so many ways, sort of the demands and the calls from communities that have been happening for years, Black and Native and Latino communities that have been speaking out against the treatment that they've received from this police department haven't been heard. And so this report puts everything in one place. But change is oftentimes hard because the incentive structures around policing are not easily changed. And what we read in that report and what we saw in that report was sort of a whole litany of sort of behavior and actions that can't sort of quickly be unwind. Overnight, you can't replace all of the people inside the department that have been given the sort of sense that they can act and respond and engage this way. You can't undo the way that training and accountability has taken place. And in the report even went deeper and looked at some of the ways in which folks who were removed from maybe the street beat were then put into training. And so there's a lot that has to be done, and the work now begins. The report in some ways illustrates the problems, but now the road ahead, I think, will be what we're all going to be focused on.
So you're saying the work begins now, but how does the work begin? I mean, should this continue? Should there be even more investigations by the DOJ into other police departments across the country? Where do we start with all of this?
Well, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, well, absolutely. We know that these local police departments can't police themselves, and that is one of the roles of the DOJ. And under the Trump administration, we basically got none of these reports, and we got none of these investigations. And so these investigations are important. But the challenge that we have is sort of the next steps on the law, right? The George Floyd Justice and Policing Act stalled in Congress. So many of the tools that were in that piece of legislation, like ending qualified immunity, which allows for police officers to basically not have the type of accountability that every other industry has when you sort of act outside of the rules and regulations of your job. You can be held accountable. In policing, you can't. And so ending qualified immunity was part of the George Floyd Policing Act, but it didn't pass. There were a number of other things that were part of that act that didn't pass as well. And so we don't have the type of tracking and tracing. And even if you fire police officers, let's say in a place like Minneapolis, they can then go and oftentimes get jobs other places, as we've seen with the killer of Tamir Rice showing up someplace else in another police department. So there's a range of laws that actually have to be put in place in order to make real the type of changes, structural changes, that I think anyone who reads this report or even hears the news stories believes, like, this is not okay. Like, this should not happen in our name or with our tax dollars. And if we truly want to have safety in our communities and justice in our communities, we actually have to have a different type of accountability for those who are entrusted with guns and with so much power.
And speaking of safety and safety within the community, I understand that your organization, Color of Change, along with some other groups, recently released a blueprint for how Black communities can actually be safer. What did you find? What were some of the biggest takeaways here?
Well, one of the biggest takeaways that we saw was that it wasn't necessarily the presence of a lot of police that sort of indicated safety. I mean, you can probably think of the safest communities near you, and they probably don't have, police presence probably doesn't define the safety. It's probably mental health services, parks, healthcare, jobs, economic development and investment, all of these things that actually make communities safe. And so our vision for public safety, our blueprint for public safety, which we released with the Vera Institute for Justice and along with the Brookings Institute, really looks at a range of policies and recommendations that we believe those type of investments actually allow us to save money on the back end. They allow us to invest in people and communities up front so that we're not dealing with issues on the back end. And I think that is really part of how we want to drive this conversation. We want to talk about what we do believe needs to be funded, what communities need in order to be safe and whole. And as we sort of celebrate Juneteenth today, and we think about the road to freedom and progress and justice, and we think about all the ways in which we have to invest, I think it's important that we recognize that as a democracy that has a government that taxes us, that budgets are moral documents. They say more about what we care about than anything that we may say in any speech. And so where we invest and how we invest says so much about what we want on the back end. And that's part of the vision for Blueprint for Public Safety. And also how we move accountability, how we land the plane on accountability. All of that is critically important as well.
What's really interesting in all of this, Rashad, is in that blueprint, when you talk about investing, you say that employment can be the key to lowering violent arrests. I want to get your take on this. How so? And how can corporate America do better when it comes to leveling the playing field for people of color? Do you feel that the addition of DEI within the corporate structure has been effective in all of this?
I mean, I think DEI has had some benefits here and there, but DEI without structural changes to the ways in which corporations work can sometimes be sort of a frosting on a undercooked cake, and that I think is one of the challenges, is that DEI cannot mask the structural changes that actually need to happen, and that is sometimes what we end up seeing. Diversity, equity, inclusion is oftentimes the only sort of place in the company that can fail year over year, and bonuses and promotions and CEO salary is not actually tied to its success. It's sort of a extracurricular activity. And so until DEI is actually tied to how the company sort of is seen as successful and how those inside the companies are evaluated, we're not going to see the type of long-term successes until companies see this connected to their bottom lines. We've been doing a lot of work around racial equity audits with major companies, pushing them to conduct these audits and really making them public. And what I always say about racial equity audits, similar to even DEI work, is that they are sort of like a checkup. They're a visible checkup. But just like a checkup with your doctor can give you a whole set of recommendations. But nothing is going to change 6 months later if you don't actually implement, and you actually don't make changes, and you actually don't move things forward. And so that's, I think, how we have to talk about all of this work and think about this work. We think a lot and we hear a lot about a conversation about race. We need to talk more about race. And I don't disagree, but we actually have to do more.
Right.
And so this is not about more analysis. It is about driving analysis to action. And when we think about this report, it is about, now that we have the analysis about what's wrong with this department, now we have to actually drive analysis to action, to structural change.
All right, so you're saying turning analysis into action, or really words into action. Rashad Robinson is the president of the Color of Change. Rashad, thank you so much for stopping by today. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Tonight, Scripps News is going to go in depth on the Justice Department's eye-opening review of Minneapolis police with Selwyn Jones, George Floyd's uncle. He's going to be speaking with a debrief about the police department's handling of his nephew's arrest, as well as the work that he's been doing to shed light on the history of Juneteenth. You can check it out tonight at 6 p.m. Eastern. In the meantime, here's what's next on Scripps News Live. Pope Francis making a triumphant return to the Apostolic Palace after recovering from abdominal surgery. Also, UK intelligence is saying that both Russia and Ukraine are suffering heavy losses right now as they battle for control of the South. We'll have new information for you next.
Do you spend hours maintaining your gutters? Save that time with LeafGuard's maintenance-free system. Call 1-833-2-GUTTERS. Mesh filters sit on top of your gutters, building up debris and eventually clogging. Then they need to be cleaned too. Honestly, your home should have been built with LeafGuard gutters. LeafGuard's wraparound hood deflects debris and keeps water away from your home. The one-piece seamless system is strong, 20% thicker than average, and built to last. Plus, LeafGuard is guaranteed to never clog for as long as you own your home. Right now, get a complete LeafGuard system for only $99 down, $99 a month, and $99 installation. You'll also receive a $100 Visa gift card with a free gutter inspection and in-home estimate. Damage from clogged gutters can cost you thousands. Never worry about clogged gutters again. Don't wait, you've still got time. Call 1-833-2-GUTTERS today. That's 1-833-2-GUTTERS.
Are you or a loved one between the ages of 50 to 80 years old? If you are younger than 80 years old, do you receive Social Security, disability, or Medicare? If you answered yes, you may qualify for $30,000 in funeral insurance for only pennies a day. The average funeral costs around $11,000, and Social Security only pays $255, leaving your loved ones to pay the balance. Call now to see if you qualify for $30,000 in funeral expense coverage from Senior Legacy Life. Your rate will never increase, your benefits will never decrease, and there is no medical exam, even if you have a pre-existing disease or illness. Don't be a financial burden to your family. Lock in your rate by completing an application over the phone right now. Will you qualify for funeral insurance up to $30,000 for only pennies a day? Find out by calling Senior Legacy Life.
Call 1-800-300-5808 to speak with a licensed insurance agent. That's 1-800-300-5808.
One way to avoid expensive car repair bills is to be a race car driver. The other is endurance.
Endurance saved me more than $7,000.
Without endurance, breakdowns can cost thousands. With endurance, you're covered.
Endurance covers nearly every car on the road. Plus,
you pick the mechanic you trust.
act now for $300 off any plan, plus a year of elite benefits and a 30-day money-back guarantee. Call 1-855-588-2580 now.
Sure, you'll teach her to drive a car. Then use Greenlight and teach her to save up for her own car. Mowing lawns and getting paid. Navigate the world of earning, saving, and investing together. Invest in your best investment. Greenlight.
Digging deeper into the headlines.
We have some big stories to get to tonight.
Shedding light on groundbreaking investigations and ending your night with something new.
Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Christian Bryant.
Scripps News Tonight, live tonight, starting at 8/7 Central.
Hey there, I'm Veronica Cruz. Welcome back to Scripps News Live. As Ukraine presses on with its counteroffensive against Russia, the United Kingdom reports both sides have suffered heavy losses. The latest report suggests that Russian casualties are at their highest level since the height of the battle for Bakhmut in March. British intelligence says that Ukraine has made small advances and Russia has been defending effectively. Russian airstrikes in Kherson killed 2 people and injured 25 others in the meantime. 3 of the injured victims were children. A high-rise, a medical administration building, and power lines were all hit. Authorities say they found 44 Russian shells over the weekend. Now, Russia has been disputing Ukraine's claims that it captured 8 southern settlements in the past 2 weeks. Ukraine's deputy defense minister praised her country's soldiers for their professionalism and their courage, and she said, depending on their location, troops were either in offensive or defensive mode. This video is from the Zaporizhzhia region, where Russia has taken over Europe's largest nuclear plant. And the head of the Wagner Group, in the meantime, says 32,000 members of his mercenary unit have returned home after serving in Ukraine. Those fighters were from Russian prisons, and they were promised pardons if they survived 6 months of frontline duty. The head of the unit says 10,000 of the forces died in Bakhmut. Now, despite Russia's claims that Ukraine blew up a dam last month that was under Russian control, drone photos and other data is suggesting that Russia did do it. The dam's destruction led to deadly flooding. It destroyed crops and jeopardized drinking water supplies. Each side has been accusing the other of destroying that dam.
Of course, there is nothing good in this. In principle, one could assume that the enemy would behave in this way, and it would be possible probably to prepare better. I agree. But the problem will be solved.
Putin is saying that Russia had no reason to attack that dam. Straight ahead on Scripps News Live, on this day 158 years ago, enslaved people in the state of Texas were declared free. But the proclamation was only the beginning, and then came perseverance.
We want people to understand that Juneteenth is our future and our past.
Coming up after a quick break, Scripps News is celebrating Juneteenth.
Are you ready for a fresh new bath or shower? Well, now is the best time with 50% off installation and no interest and no payments for 1 year. Hi, I'm Christina, and it's time to flip your old worn out bath or shower with Jacuzzi Bath Remodel today. Everyone knows the Jacuzzi brand. They're the most trusted name in water for over 60 years. But did you know they can install a gorgeous bath or shower that feels incredible in as little as 1 day? It's no stress and no mess with a lifetime warranty. Now let's talk beauty. You deserve to start and end your day in a beautiful space that feels great and is custom designed just for you. So call or go online now to see the Christina preferred designs like Canyon, Farm, and Urban. Now that's the total bathroom beauty that I love at a price you can afford. And how about safety? Like an ultra low profile, easy entry shower complete with grab bars and a custom design seat. You deserve safety and peace of mind without sacrificing style. Because with all the worries in daily life, taking a shower shouldn't be one of them.
Every time I stepped over my old tub, I worried I might fall. I don't have those fears anymore. Jacuzzi Bath Remodel gave me a gorgeous shower that's safe too.
I've been trying to get him to remodel that bath for years. I called and they did in just 1 day.
And at a price we could afford.
With one call to Jacuzzi Bath Remodel, you can effortlessly transform that old, ugly eyesore into the stunning bath or shower of your dreams that you'll love for years to come.
Call or go online now to jacuzzibathremodel.com to get 50% off installation. Plus, ask how you may qualify for no interest and no payments for 12 months. And when you call right now, we'll give you our complete safety upgrade for free. Go to jacuzzibathremodel.com or call 800-218-1279. That's 800-218-1279. Call now.
Do you have a box of videotapes, film reels, or photos that are degrading? Legacy Box professionally converts them to DVDs, thumb drive, or the cloud. Legacy Box is simple and safe, with over 1 million satisfied customers. Visit legacybox.com.
1 year since the end of Roe versus Wade. Look at what's changed.
What exactly does it mean to have the life of the mother at risk?
Abortion in America, Friday night at 8/7 Central on Scripps News.
Welcome back. Celebrations are now underway across the country for Juneteenth. It marks the June 19th, 1865 date when the last enslaved people learned that they were free. Many Black Americans have recognized this day for decades, but just 2 years ago, President Biden signed legislation to make Juneteenth a federal holiday. While Juneteenth celebrates the end of slavery, Black Americans faced legalized racial segregation until the 1960s, and this prompted them to create their own communities. And now many have made it their mission to preserve this history. Janae Wright with Scripps News Baltimore explains why this small schoolhouse is now a symbol of how far the nation has come.
Tucked away in a wooded area of southern Maryland sits a one-room schoolhouse. And while the school closed down in 1944, the building continues to be a place of learning.
This is the Drayton African American Schoolhouse, which is one of the best preserved one-room schoolhouses in the country and one of the last here in St. Mary's County.
The school opened in the 1890s for Black children in the community who weren't allowed to attend white schools during segregation. Karen Stone is the museum division manager for St. Mary's County, which now owns and operates the schoolhouse as a museum. The 2018 restoration, she says, was a community effort.
So many of the students and the descendants of the teachers that attended school here are still part of the community. So we were saving their stories. It's not a generic schoolhouse story. There are still very real ties to the community and the families here.
Families like the Smiths remembering a father who went to the school.
He was our only child, and he made sure that it's 7 of us. He made sure that we stayed on top of everything and always strived to be better.
Timothy Smith's son, Michael, still learning new things about his own grandfather.
Now that I'm looking at this, I didn't realize that his education didn't go past, the 5th or 6th grade. In high school, in middle school, high school, I struggled with math. My grandfather helped me with algebra, calculus. We did it every day almost on the floor of his house after work. So it's pretty amazing that he didn't have that education, but we definitely passed with great grades from that.
Even during that era, after slavery, you were all segregated.
Janice Waltower's grandparents were some of the first teachers at the school. She says she's listened to former students' stories throughout the years.
Clarence Smith, and he talked about what it was like to start reading a book and the page was torn out and you were running around in this room looking for somebody that had the page so you could finish. But what always impressed me about what he said, but you done what you had to do to get an education.
And the community did what had to be done to preserve the history of Drayton Schoolhouse to continue educating about its legacy.
I want them to understand how hard the students and teachers here fought to get the best education that they could. It wasn't the best in the country, it wasn't the best in the county, but it was the best they could get. And if they put the work in, then they were going to benefit by what they were able to learn here.
And that was Janae Wright reporting there for us. You're watching Scripps News Live. I'm Veronica Cruz. Our coverage continues shortly with this morning's critical meeting between Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Chinese President Xi Jinping. The progress that's been made during this 2-day trip and the important work that still needs to be done. We'll have the details after this. We're back after a short break.
Welcome to the place where people go to learn about their Medicare options before they're on Medicare.
Come on in. You're turning 65 soon? Yeah. And you're retiring at 67?
That's the plan.
Well, you've come to the right place.
Now's the time to plan ahead. Learn about an AARP Medicare Supplement Insurance Plan from United Healthcare and how a plan like this helps you take charge of your healthcare with lower out-of-pocket costs. Here's why. Medicare alone doesn't pay for everything. Your deductibles and copays could add up to hundreds, even thousands of dollars a year.
Everyone's a little surprised to learn that one.
Adding a Medicare supplement plan helps pay some of what Medicare doesn't. And that could mean fewer surprises and more predictable out-of-pocket costs. Call United Healthcare and ask for your free decision guide. Or talk with a licensed insurance agent or producer to learn more about plan benefits, options, and rates. Medicare supplement plans let you choose any doctor, any specialist, anywhere in the U.S. who accepts Medicare patients. You don't have to deal with any networks or referrals. This kind of plan also goes with you anywhere you travel in the country. If you're turning 65 soon or over 65 and planning to retire, find out more about the only Medicare supplement plans endorsed by AARP.
Thumbs up to that.
Remember, the time to prepare is before you go on Medicare.
Don't wait. Get started today.
Take charge of your health care. Call United Healthcare for your free decision guide and learn more about lowering your out-of-pocket Medicare costs and seeing any doctor who accepts Medicare patients.
Oh, and happy birthday or retirement in advance.
Hey there. Thank you so much for staying with us on this Monday afternoon. It is now 1 p.m. in the East, 10 a.m. out West. I'm Veronica Cruz. Great to see you today. Welcome back to Scripps News Live. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken headed to London after a high-stakes meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping. In a press conference held after the meeting, Secretary Blinken said that both countries recognize the growing tension between them and that both nations plan to try and, quote, stabilize their relationship. The leaders agree this will not be their last meeting. Secretary Blinken will meet with his UK and Ukrainian counterparts next in London. Let's get you right out to White House correspondent Haley Bull, who joins us now live from Washington. So, Haley, what else came out of this meeting? What is the White House saying right now?
Well, Veronica, the communication between both countries on major issues and the indications that senior level dialogue continues is a sign of progress coming out of this meeting amid times of tension between the U.S. and China. Now, keep in mind, heading into this, the administration kept the expectations low, stating early on that their goals were to establish communication channels, but not necessarily anticipating deliverables to come out of this dialogue. Now, Secretary Blinken's trip is the latest and the highest level in a series of engagements between U.S. and Chinese officials after Secretary Blinken's original trip there was postponed following the discovery of China's spy balloon over the U.S. mainland. Now, the State Department called today's talks candid and constructive as Blinken met with his counterparts and China's President Xi Jinping. Now, Blinken said he underscored in that meeting the importance of communication and keeping competition from eroding into conflict. Now, some of the big topics at play during this visit: the economy. China has shared a view that they view U.S. policy as, quote, containing its development. Blinken said he reiterated their interest is in, quote, de-risking, not decoupling, but drew the line when it comes to national security interests. Another major topic, the Taiwan Strait. Blinken says he reiterated the U.S.'s one China policy view. He said they also addressed human rights, including the wrongful detainment of Americans. And they also looked for areas of cooperation, including on climate, food security, and efforts to stop chemicals that feed the fentanyl market. But one significant area where there did not appear to be progress was on the military-to-military lines of communication. Blinken saying there was not, quote, immediate progress. Listen.
We have no illusions about the challenges of managing this relationship. There are many issues on which we profoundly, even vehemently, disagree. We will always take the best course of action to advance the interests of the American people. But the United States has a long history of successfully managing complicated, consequential relationships through diplomacy. It's the responsibility of both countries to find a path forward, and it's in both our interests and the interests of the world that we do so.
Now, Blinken expects more visits and communication between senior officials. He said he invited his counterpart to Washington. President Biden also said he hopes to meet with Xi again over the coming months. The White House has previously stated Biden looked to talk with Xi, quote, when the time is right. So we will certainly see going forward how this visit lays the groundwork. Veronica?
All right, Haley Bull reporting live from Washington. We're going to continue to watch this one, Haley. Thank you. And our coverage of Secretary Blinken's meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping is going to continue in about 30 minutes from now. Former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for NATO, Jim Townsend, will be joining us. That's straight ahead at 1:30 p.m. Eastern. Gun violence rocking communities across the country over the weekend, with shooting sprees reported in cities from San Francisco to Baltimore. According to the Gun Violence Archive, 13 people were killed in shootings over the holiday weekend. Another 94 were wounded. Scripps News national correspondent Morris Sirianni has more now on the violence that marred this holiday weekend and how law enforcement has been responding.
Another violent weekend, most of these instances involving young people. So weekend gun violence bringing the total number of mass shootings in this country to 310 this year. Let's start in Illinois, where one person is dead and at least 22 others were injured after several people opened fire in a crowd during a Juneteenth celebration in a parking lot. You see that scene here. Now, the shooting happening in a suburb south of Chicago. Authorities say they have persons of interest, but so far No arrests have been made. And in Washington state, 2 people were killed and 2 others were hurt at this scene after police say a person began randomly firing into a crowd Saturday at the camping area of an EDM festival beyond Wonderland. Thousands of people were attending this festival at the time in the central part of the state. Police said the suspected gunman was shot by responding officers.
The shooter continued to shoot randomly into the crowd, and the suspect was eventually taken into custody. We have casualties. We now can confirm that there have been 2 people killed, and there are 3 injured, which includes the shooter.
And in St. Louis, a 17-year-old is dead and 9 other teens are injured following a shooting during a party in a downtown office building. It happened Sunday around 1 a.m. Police say the shooting victims range in age from just 15 years old to 19. They say a minor with a handgun is in custody, and police are calling that teen a person of interest. The mayor of St. Louis over the weekend calling this disturbing, also calling it every parent's worst nightmare. And then also in Southern California, 8 people were wounded at a pool party. The Gun Violence Archive reporting more than 800 children and teens have been killed by gun violence this year. Mara Sirianni, Scripps News, Atlanta.
Nearly 2 weeks after a deadly shooting outside a high school graduation in Richmond, Virginia, that impact still being felt. Janine Samuels of Scripps News Richmond spoke with a graduate and his mother about how their joy and excitement were quickly smothered by fear and how they are now moving forward.
I felt really amazing that day.
The big day finally here, 17 years in the making.
You know, I got to see all my principals and vice principals and all my friends in the crowd and hear my mom in the background screaming, Xavier.
Xavier Liggins from Richmond, now a graduate of Huguenot High School.
It was really exhilarating to see him walk across that stage looking handsome and happy.
Hearing him pronounce that we're finally graduates of Huguenot High School, that really changed me.
Breaking news out of Richmond this evening, a mass shooting outside a high school graduation.
My graduation was supposed to be peaceful and a reliever.
But it wasn't.
All those things you see on TV are real.
Xavier and his mother, Donna, and everyone else in the courtyard in front of the Altria forced to face the tragic reality of gun violence.
And all of a sudden, shots just started ringing out, and they were so loud, very loud.
People was running. People was screaming. I've seen a lot of things that day. But what I did was
get down.
Get down.
The ground just didn't seem low enough. I wanted the ground to just be even lower, or just open up and swallow us in until we could come out. That's how terrifying it was. I was waiting for the bullets to hit.
Donna telling me that there were more than 10 shots fired.
It was a lot of shots because I kept asking myself, when are they going to stop? When are they going to stop?
The shots finally came to an end.
My mind was taken away because I'm looking on the ground. There's someone convulsing down on the ground. And there was another lady. She was just standing there by herself, crying. And so I just reached out to her and I kind of held her and rubbed her arms like, you know, are you okay? Where's your people? Do you know where your people are? And she was just like, I just wanted to see my son graduate from high school. That's what she said.
After caring for 2 complete strangers, the Liggins family finally head to their car.
We were in survival mode at that moment. We just wanted to get out of there. But yet, on the way out of there, we were going, to the car, going toward the car, which seemed like it was miles away, like we would never get to the car.
Xavier learning of his classmate Sean Jackson's death in the car from
Instagram. It was really sad.
Now Xavier coping through written word, a message to his classmates.
You've made it to the finish line. And it's time to take a breath. before you start a new race. The next chapter will be full of surprises, but I'm sure that you guys will be ready for anything that comes your way. Trust and believe that. If you want to be a better person, do what you got to do in order to become that person.
Supreme Court justices just 2 weeks away now from breaking for the summer. Straight ahead on Scripps News Live, we're going to take a closer look at some of the big cases that the High Court is still weighing. Also, a new study questioning the safety of the LGBTQ plus community on social media platforms. After a quick break, we're going to take a closer look at the findings for you. And don't forget right here that you can always count on Scripps News for all of your headlines throughout the primetime hours as well, beginning at 6 p.m. Eastern.
This year, Americans will spend $41 billion on auto repairs.
That's right, billions with a B. Why is that number so high? Because cars break down. Your vehicle is going to end up in a shop like this too, and if it's no longer under warranty, you're the one who has to pay the bill, and it could cost you thousands of dollars. That is, unless you call CarShield. With a plan through CarShield, administrators will pay for those costly repairs directly to the mechanic of your choice, including dealerships. That means you get protection on major parts and systems like the engine, transmission, electrical systems, and more. Plus, 24/7 emergency services for flat or damaged tires, lockouts, dead batteries, and towing at no additional cost. And there are even rental car options to keep you on the road.
I've been a mechanic for 35 plus years now. I've seen thousands of repairs over the years. My happiest customers are the ones that come in who have some kind of auto protection policy that's going to cover the repair that they wasn't expecting anyway. I feel great about recommending CarShield to everybody I see.
CarShield has a rich history of dependability, reliability, and success, and has been featured on leading networks like ABC, CNN, Fox News, and more. CarShield is America's most trusted auto protection company.
My mom told me to call CarShield, and I saved $5,000. You should always listen to your mom.
As soon as my car broke down, CarShield jumped into action, and I had my car back within days.
I've been with CarShield for close to 7 years. I have 3 vehicles covered, and I saved close to $9,000.
I called CarShield and saved over $5,000.
Yes, CarShield is a good value. Every plan through CarShield comes with a price lock guarantee, which means no matter how many repairs you need, the price you pay today will never change for as long as you cover your car.
Call now and save money with your price lock guarantee. It's not a matter of if your car will break down, but when. Call CarShield now before it's too late. Call 800-287-5264. 800-287-5264. 800-287-5264.
This is a paid advertisement for legal services. If you've been diagnosed with mesothelioma, call now. Billions have been set aside for victims. You may be entitled to compensation. Call now, 1-800-712-3700. That's 1-800-712-3700.
The Athletic. Subscribe today. This is a premium hand-selected bacon wrap filet mignon that's aged for tenderness and trimmed to perfection. This is a necktie. What do you think Dad wants for Father's Day? Visit omahasteaks.com/TV to order the Dads Want Steak package today for just $99.99, and we'll include 8 additional burgers free. So get him this, not this. This. Go to omahasteaks.com/TV today because Dad deserves it. Just a little Father's Day wisdom from Omaha Steaks.
Well, it is crunch time at the Supreme Court as people across the nation wait for several big rulings to come down now. Congressional correspondent Stephanie Liebergen gives us a feel for the cases that are going to be grabbing the headlines over the next 2 months.
There's just 2 weeks left before the Supreme Court justices are expected to start their summer break. And as usual, we're still waiting for decisions on some of the biggest cases of the term. The court has a whopping 18 cases still pending, and many on controversial issues. Among them, whether colleges and universities can consider race in admissions. 2 cases, one filed against Harvard and another against the University of North Carolina, argue the consideration of race disadvantages some students and violates the Constitution.
We believe that a student's race should not be used to help them or harm them in seeking admission to any college or university in the country.
Current Supreme Court precedent says race can be a factor in admissions, but schools can't set a racial quota, and it must be one of many factors they consider. If the justices overturn that precedent, it could have a big impact on elite universities where admissions are very competitive.
Well, good afternoon.
Another pending decision could impact President Biden's student debt relief plan. The administration wants to eliminate up to $20,000 of debt for eligible borrowers, but 2 lawsuits that reached the Supreme Court could block that financial relief. If the justices say the Biden administration exceeded its authority, the more than 16 million borrowers who've already been fully approved won't get the debt forgiveness they've been waiting for. With Monday being a federal holiday for Juneteenth, no decisions expected today. The next opinion day is set for Thursday at 10 a.m. Stephanie Liebergen, Scripps News, Washington.
More than 1 million Americans have lost their Medicaid coverage the past couple of months in a post-COVID pandemic purge. Florida has dropped several hundreds of thousands of people. It is the most in the nation. Many people were eliminated because they never filed their paperwork to continue. More than 93 million people were enrolled in Medicaid in February, and that was up nearly a third from before the pandemic. One of the world's largest LGBTQ+ advocacy groups released an alarming new report out about the safety of queer communities on major social media platforms. National correspondent Stephanie Sandvall takes a closer look at the findings for us.
One of the world's leading LGBTQ+ advocacy groups releasing its report card on how major social media platforms protect members of the LGBTQ community. GLAAD giving Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, and Twitter all low or failing grades for LGBTQ safety against hate speech and harassment in its 3rd annual Social Media Safety Index. The 24-page report calling Twitter the most dangerous platform.
It's been a really unfortunate thing. I mean, for all users, but especially for LGBTQ folks.
Jenny Olson oversees GLAAD's Social Media Safety Index and is one of the authors of this year's report. Olson says that one of the major reasons for the low safety scores is that platforms are failing to interpret and enforce their own policies against hate speech and harassment.
We over and over again find that even though all of the companies actually have policies that very clearly say hate speech is not allowed on YouTube, period. Super simple. The reality is the way that they seem to interpret what that means is very different than how we interpret what that means.
Despite failing grades for all 5 platforms, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube saw their scores rise modestly from last year's index. Twitter's score, however, declined 12 points from 2022. It comes amid a string of regressive policies and practices after Elon Musk took over the company last October, with Musk himself posting anti-transgender memes on the platform.
Free speech matters, and it's only relevant if people are allowed to say things that you don't like.
In April, the company also quietly removed a policy against the targeted misgendering or dead naming of transgendered individuals.
It's become a really dangerous place. GLAAD is part of the Stop Toxic Twitter Coalition, which is a coalition of more than 60 civil society organizations extremely concerned about the level of toxic hate and disinformation on the platform.
While Twitter has taken noticeable steps back in its policies and protections, Meta, which owns Facebook and Instagram, saw a 15-point improvement in its safety score. It's a result of new policies from Meta that prohibits misgendering users and enforces gender policy training for content moderators. TikTok also taking steps to improve its privacy offerings for LGBTQ+ members since GLAAD's 2022 report, also enforcing policy training for content moderation. YouTube also credited for improvements to its training protocols and diversity reporting. Despite the changes, GLAAD says it found that all of the major platforms, quote, continue to fail at enforcing the safeguarding of LGBTQ users from online hate speech, going on to say those platforms also fail at expressing commitments to protecting LGBTQ users, specifically policies and commitments to protect transgender, non-binary, and gender non-conforming users from being targeted.
And so there needs to be regulatory solutions that will force them to genuinely be accountable and to genuinely make their products safe.
And that was national correspondent Stephanie Sandoval reporting there for us. Still ahead on Scripps News Live, we're going to take a deeper dive into the history behind segregated pools and beaches.
People often think that that 1964 incident is a solitary incident. However, we start to see that Black bodies are still being policed in pools.
Coming up after the break, more on the fight for equal access to amenities and the ripple effect that it's had on Black Americans.
1 year since the end of Roe versus Wade.
I fought for the right to abortion prior to Roe v. Wade.
It is upsetting because abortion is upsetting.
A Scripps News special report looks at what's changed.
What exactly does it mean to have the life of the mother at risk?
And what's next?
It may feel hopeless, but resistance always matters.
Abortion in America, Friday night at 8/7 Central on Scripps News.
Do you spend hours maintaining your gutters? Save that time with LeafGuard's maintenance-free system. Call 1-833-2-GUTTERS. Mesh filters sit on top of your gutters, building up debris and eventually clogging. Then they need to be cleaned too. Honestly, your home should have been built with LeafGuard gutters. LeafGuard's wraparound hood deflects debris and keeps water away from your home. The one-piece seamless system is strong, 20% thicker than average, and built to last. Plus, LeafGuard is guaranteed to never clog for as long as you own your home. Right now, get a complete LeafGuard system for only $99 down, $99 a month, and $99 installation. You'll also receive a $100 Visa gift card with a free gutter inspection and in-home estimate. Damage from clogged gutters can cost you thousands. Never worry about clogged gutters again. Don't wait, you've still got time. Call 1-833-2-GUTTERS today. That's 1-833-2-GUTTERS.
There's a new victim of identity theft every 3 seconds. And checking your credit score or bank statements may not be enough to alert you. That's because identity threats appear in more places than you realize. Identity thieves can use your information to open loans, transfer home titles, even commit crimes.
Someone stole my information and tried to buy a car in my name.
LifeLock monitors for threats to your identity, including ones you may miss, and alerts you if there's an issue. And if you're a victim, your dedicated U.S.-based restoration specialist will work to fix it.
If something happens, you have somebody fighting for you.
All plans backed by LifeLock's $1 Million Protection Package, including reimbursement for stolen funds.
I know LifeLock has me covered.
LifeLock, identity theft protection starts here. Call the number on your screen or visit lifelock.com/25now and use promo code 25now to save 25% on your first year of identity theft protection. Enroll now.
Sure, you should teach him to ride a bike. Then use Greenlight and teach him how to invest in bikes. Teach him to be smart about money and he'll go far.
Super far! Oh, hey, Mom!
Navigate the world of money together. Invest in your best investment. Greenlight.
At Rue La La, feel like $1 million without paying the price. Seize the deals on top names before they're gone. Get in to never miss out. Shop RueLaLa.com today.
Sunday nights on In Real Life.
And for the baby?
Yeah!
Scripps News journalists take you off the grid.
We were just a bunch of kids with a camera.
Stunts have become more specialized.
And to the heart of the story.
When the pandemic hit, the American dream kind of changed.
There were a lot of warning signs. They just didn't care.
In Real Life, Sunday at 8/7 Central, only on Scripps News.
Juneteenth celebrations now underway across the country today. It marks June 19th, 1865, when the last enslaved people learned that they were free. Many Black Americans have recognized the day for decades now, but just 2 years ago, President Biden signed legislation to make Juneteenth a federal holiday. While Juneteenth celebrates the end of slavery, the decades of discrimination that followed left a scar on our nation. Legalized racial segregation blocked Black Americans' access to several establishments, including public pools and beaches. Scripps News correspondent Amber Strong takes a deeper dive into the history for us.
The shores of Belmont Beach in Indianapolis tell a story.
This was the early 1930s, and segregation was legal.
A story of triumph and a snapshot into the realities of history.
There were a group of Black business owners and community-minded people who wanted to have a place of our own.
But that history comes with highs and lows.
The water was very polluted due to industrialization that was going on at the time.
It wasn't just Belmont Beach. In the 1930s, Black people were systemically pushed to places like this, where water safety didn't really exist and drownings were frequent. Like a pebble tossed into a lake, experts say there was a ripple effect. Today, 64% of African American children have low or no swimming ability, compared to 40% of white children.
If your parents don't swim, or the grown-up at home doesn't swim, or the caretaker at home doesn't swim, then chances are you're not going to swim.
Dr. Tiffany Monique Quash is a swim coach and research methodologist at American University and says attempts to desegregate swimming often turned violent. Take the 1964 wade-in St. Augustine, Florida, for example.
The Motor Lodge's manager poured muriatic acid upon people participating in a wade-in. People often think that that 1964 incident is a solitary incident. However, we start to see that Black bodies are still being policed in pools.
Today, barriers still exist, from a lack of access to public pools to the banning of swim caps for Black hair by the International Swimming Federation, something eventually overturned. There are also generational myths, like the notion that Black people have a different body density or an inability to float. Hurdles a generation of swimmers and teachers like Quash are dispelling one by one.
By being present on the deck and noting the importance that representation matters, as a Black woman, it's important for other kids, particularly other Black kids, but most importantly, other kids see me on the deck.
Back at Belmont Beach.
This is a space for Black joy first, and we don't get to celebrate us enough.
Like the sands of time, which are always changing, the so-called Friends of Belmont Beach are looking forward to bringing new life to these shores while honoring the legacy of those who walked before them.
Today, the group known as Friends of Belmont Beach have cleaned up the shores that went to waste after years of neglect, hosting free events and a community garden. They're also using the history to bring attention to the need for swimming lessons and opportunities for all, working with area programs to do just that.
When you look out over this beach and you think about the history and the people who walk the sand here, why is it important for you to make sure that their legacy doesn't end?
There's no way I could be out here doing this right now if they hadn't have done what they did back then. So yeah, it's, imperative to keep their stories alive.
Amber Strong, Scripps News, Indianapolis.
Our coverage of Secretary Blinken's meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping continues. Straight ahead on Scripps News Live, we're going to take a closer look at the significance of that meeting. Also, I'd like to remind you right here to follow us at Scripps News on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. We'll be right back.
If you have this, and you get this, you could end up with this. Unexpected out-of-pocket costs, which for those on Medicare or soon to be, is a good reason to take charge of your health care. So consider this: an AARP Medicare Supplement Insurance Plan from United Healthcare. Why? Because Medicare alone doesn't pay for everything. And what it doesn't pay for, like deductibles and copays, could really add up, even thousands of dollars a year. Medicare supplement plans help by paying some of what Medicare doesn't, and making your out-of-pocket costs a lot more predictable. Call United Healthcare today and ask for your free decision guide. Learn more about plan options and rates to fit your needs. Now, if you like this, greater freedom, you'll love that Medicare supplement plans have no networks and no referrals needed. See any doctor, any specialist, anywhere in the U.S., as long as they accept Medicare patients. These types of plans also give you more flexibility when traveling in the U.S. Your plan goes with you, anywhere you go in the country. Even better, these are the only plans of their kind, endorsed by AARP. Call United Healthcare today for your free decision guide. So if you have this and want less out-of-pocket costs and more peace of mind, consider adding this, an AARP Medicare supplement plan. Take charge of your health care today. Just use this or this to call United Healthcare about an AARP Medicare supplement plan.
Hey there, welcome back to Scripps News Live. Great to see you on this Monday. Thank you so much for starting your week off with us. I'm Veronica Cruz. Let's get you caught up right now on the day's top stories. Authorities in Illinois reportedly interviewing persons of interest in a deadly shooting. It happened yesterday during a Juneteenth celebration in Willowbrook, where hundreds were gathered in a parking lot. Officials are saying one person has died, 22 others were injured. A motive remains unclear. Jayland Walker's family is seeking $45 million from officials in Akron, Ohio. Police fatally shot the 25-year-old black man last summer, and his family sued the 8 officers involved in the shooting, as well as the city of Akron, its mayor, and its police chief. The lawsuit alleges city officials have ignored the police department's, quote, culture of violence and racism. Police tried to pull Walker over last June, but he ended up leading them on a chase. Officers then shot him dozens of times when they thought that he was reaching into his waistband for a weapon. This new lawsuit comes 2 months after a grand jury decided not to indict the officers involved in Walker's death. Rescue missions and damage assessments still underway right now after multiple tornadoes swept Mississippi overnight. The storms killed 1 person and injured nearly 24 others. They tore a path through communities in Jasper and Rankin counties and then knocked out power for tens of thousands of people. Mississippi's Governor Tate Reeves says that he is opening command centers and shelters for those still in need. We're now on Antony Blinken's trip to China, where he became the first Secretary of State to visit Beijing in 5 years. He was in China for 2 days, meeting with top officials in an effort to ease relationships, which have been spiraling downward. Now today, the secretary met with Chinese President Xi Jinping, and while some key issues are still not resolved, both sides have expressed optimism about moving forward with talks. Jim Townsend is a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for NATO and Europe. He joins us now live. Jim, thank you so much for being with us today.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
Let's go ahead and start right here with the significance of this meeting. How important was this meeting for the United States, and what does it signal to you that President Xi wanted to sit down? He wanted a face-to-face meeting with the U.S. Secretary of State.
Well, that was a great signal, I think, that the Chinese also want to improve the senior level leadership discussions between our two countries. That's what the administration really wanted to get out of this meeting, a good first step, and to start talking at the senior levels. And the fact that she met for 35 minutes with the Secretary of State was a signal that perhaps he wants to do that as well. We'll have to see.
And Jim, this meeting obviously comes amid escalating tensions between the two countries. Geopolitically, how do Taiwan, or maybe these Chinese spy balloon incidents, how do they factor into this? Explain how tense of a situation this has become.
Well, it was especially tense before we began to talk to one another, when we had no real link of communication, and these instances would happen like the spy balloon, and we would have to just try to perceive what was going on in Beijing. And the same thing with the Chinese about us, and we had some instances over the Pacific as well militarily. And so that's always the time of highest tension, when you don't really know what's going on the other side, and you have to guess, and you can make a wrong guess. So right now, going forward, we've got some channel of communications that are going on at the senior level that will help us deal with tension and with instances that will happen in the future too. We will have these kinds of things that can increase the heat between the two countries, but at least now we've got some channels to talk about this and to lower the heat.
One of those hot button issues, obviously, for China has been Taiwan. But when someone like the Secretary of State sits down with the president of China, how much of the discussion focuses on Taiwan, and how much of it focuses on things like trade and semiconductors? How important is the discussion when it comes to the Chinese economy?
Well, that's a great question. And I know over the 2 days of talks, all of those issues that you raised were discussed, not necessarily with Xi, but they were discussed with the secretary's counterparts and with other Chinese officials. And it ran the gamut. It's North Korea. It's also climate, food security, health. There's a lot of things that we have in common, our two countries, that we need to work on. And those were discussed. But when Xi sat down, certainly Taiwan was discussed. I think the U.S. had to make clear where it stood in terms of our support for Taiwan. And she made clear to all of us where he considered that Taiwan fit into the thinking in Beijing. So certainly it was expressions by both sides to clear the air about what we each thought of one another, including over issues such as Taiwan. So we had to clear the air, and I think they did.
Yeah, clearing the air has been really, really important because communication has somewhat broken down and is an area that definitely needs to improve. But China continues to refuse to communicate military to military. How important is this type of communication, especially given the situation in Taiwan right now?
Well, exactly. And this mill communication, as they call it, is probably one of the most important communications links there, so that if something happens in the Pacific, our two airplanes bump or the ships cut one another off, it's important that the military commanders on the scene very quickly can communicate with their counterparts to explain what happened, so that the wrong conclusion isn't drawn by the Chinese or by the United States. So you're absolutely right. In terms of communication, the mill-to-mill is the most important when it comes to avoid an incident becoming something bigger than that. And unfortunately, that was not, we didn't make much progress this time around, but we did make progress on communications generally. And I think perhaps the next round will make some headway on the mill-to-mill as well.
Well, taking that into account, Jim, how can we gauge how well these talks went? What do you think? How realistic were expectations going into it? And where do you think things head next?
Well, expectations were pretty low. The U.S. particularly kept it low. And essentially, this set of meetings was really to kind of start the engines back up. So breakthroughs and this type of thing will be for the future, not necessarily for this past 2 days. But I will say that the fact that they were able to meet and speak for 2 days, and that she was there, and that there will be follow-on visits. Janet Yellen, I heard, might be visiting China, and her counterparts from China might come to the United States. I'm hoping that what we'll see in terms of the future is more visits by senior leaders, discussions about a range of issues that we have in common, like climate, that we can work on together, and that we can get the mill-to-mill link going as well. So those are things for the future. This is where things are going. So the engines have started up. This is a first step forward. It's one foot in front of the other. And I really do believe this is going to give us a better opportunity to understand where each of us is coming from when it comes to issues in the Indo-Pacific. And we can avoid the tensions we've had in the past.
Yeah, it had been 5 years since we had even seen anything like this. So there is some progress here, like you had just said. Jim Townsend is a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for NATO and Europe. Jim, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
I want to get you overseas right now to Greece. A court there postponing a hearing today for 9 Egyptian men accused of smuggling migrants. The overcrowded fishing trawler they were on was on its way to Italy when it sank off the coast of Greece on June 14th. Pakistan is now saying that more than 300 nationals drowned. Greece says 78 people died, hundreds remain missing. Close to 750 people were on board that trawler. The boat was on its way from Libya to Italy when it sank, and Greek authorities are denying claims that the boat capsized as its Coast Guard attached ropes to tow it to shore. Ugandan authorities are saying they've arrested 20 people that they think are connected to an attack that killed 42 people at a school in Uganda. Most of those victims were students. Scripps correspondent Leon Sanyege says that a rebel group is being blamed now for this attack.
Authorities say assailants stormed the boarding section of the Lubiriha Secondary School on Friday night, burning down a dormitory and looting food. They say the attack in Impondwe town near the border with the Democratic Republic of Congo came at the hands of the Allied Democratic Forces. Among the 20 people who have been arrested are the school head teacher and director. The number of fatalities now stands at 42, with 5 identified as non-school residents. Other schools in the area have also been closed, with parents, teachers and students fearing a repeat attack. However, there has been a heavy deployment of police and the military in the area. Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni has also ordered the deployment of more troops on the border with the Democratic Republic of Congo. President Museveni said troops will be stationed on both sides of the border, especially in the Mwalika Valley, which is a ground for the rebel group. The Allied Democratic Forces have been operating in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo for close to 2 decades. The militant group claimed responsibility for the 2021 bomb attacks on Uganda's capital, Kampala. They have also been accused of committing atrocities in the Democratic Republic of Congo, leading to huge deaths and the displacement of hundreds of thousands of people. Leon Senyange, Scripps News, Kampala.
Despite Russia's claims that Ukraine blew up a dam which was under construction last month, drone photos and other data are suggesting that Russia did it. The dam's destruction led to deadly flooding, destroyed crops, and it jeopardized drinking water supplies. Each side has accused the other of destroying that dam.
Of course, there is nothing good in this. In principle, one could assume that the enemy would behave in this way, and it would be possible probably to prepare better. I agree. But the problem will be solved.
Putin says Russia had no reason to attack that dam. Coming up next on Scripps News Live, a growing trend in professional sports is seeing several teams on the move, and it could include a staple like the Bears leaving Chicago. Also, details on a woman's mission to encourage others to support LGBTQ+ communities beyond Pride Month. We'll explain after this.
Are you ready for a fresh new bath or shower? Well, now is the best time with 50% off installation and no interest and no payments for 1 year. Hi, I'm Christina, and it's time to flip your old worn-out bath or shower with Jacuzzi Bath Remodel today. Everyone knows the Jacuzzi brand. They're the most trusted name in water for over 60 years. But did you know they can install a gorgeous bath or shower that feels incredible in as little as 1 day? It's no stress and no mess with a lifetime warranty. Now let's talk beauty. You deserve to start and end your day in a beautiful space that feels great and is custom designed just for you. So call or go online now to see the Christina preferred designs like Canyon, Farm, and Urban. Now that's the total bathroom beauty that I love at a price you can afford. And how about safety? Like an ultra low profile, easy entry shower complete with grab bars and a custom design seat. You deserve safety and peace of mind without sacrificing style. Because with all the worries in daily life, taking a shower shouldn't be one of them.
Every time I stepped over my old tub, I worried I might fall. I don't have those fears anymore. Jacuzzi Bath Remodel gave me a gorgeous shower that's safe too.
I've been trying to get him to remodel that bath for years. I called and they did in just 1 day.
And at a price we could afford.
With one call to Jacuzzi Bath Remodel, you can effortlessly transform that old, ugly eyesore into the stunning bath or shower of your dreams that you'll love for years to come.
Call or go online now to jacuzzibathremodel.com to get 50% off installation. Plus, ask how you may qualify for no interest and no payments for 12 months. And when you call right now, we'll give you our complete safety upgrade for free. Go to jacuzzibathremodel.com or call 800-218-1279. That's 800-218-1279. Call now.
How does Klein & Spector get among the most big verdicts and settlements of any law firm in the country? Because Klein & Spector is an award-winning team with 5 doctor lawyers, the most of any firm in the United States. And that's why the New York Times calls Klein & Spector a powerhouse law firm. So if a defective product, motor vehicle accident, or medical malpractice caused a catastrophic injury, call Klein & Spector.
Do you have a box of videotapes, film reels, or photos that are degrading?
Legacy Box professionally converts them to DVDs, thumb drive, or the cloud.
Legacy Box is simple and safe, with over 1 million satisfied customers.
Visit legacybox.com.
Local, national, and worldwide headlines.
breaking down the day's biggest stories with live reporting from around the globe.
I'm Del Walters, and this is The Debrief.
Live tonight, starting at 6/5 Central, only on Scripps News.
Quick reminder right here, we'd like to hear from you. You can always give us a call on our Scripps News viewer hotline toll free. That number is on your screen. It's 1-8334-SCRIPPS. Feel free to share your comments and your story ideas. So professional sports teams in the United States are about winning, losing, and making money. Modernizing sports stadiums and arenas now often cost more than $1 billion. Several sports teams are on the move either to new cities or from the cities to the suburbs. Sports contributor Paul Crane has more on what is becoming a growing trend.
Professional sports leagues once treated the city of Las Vegas like it was radioactive due to concerns over gambling. Not anymore. The NHL's Las Vegas Golden Knights just won the Stanley Cup. The NFL's Raiders have moved there, and now Major League Baseball is on the way. Those gambling concerns have been replaced by cash, making professional sports teams and their stadiums a winning bet. Stadium issues in Oakland played a big role in the NFL's Raiders rolling the dice and moving to Las Vegas in 2022. The new Allegiant Stadium was built for $1.9 billion, $750 million from public funding, and the rest from the Raiders and NFL. In return, the stadium will host the Super Bowl in February 2024 and Men's Final Four in 2028. Ironically, the Raiders were never allowed to make changes to the Oakland Coliseum due to the stadium's lease with Major League Baseball's Oakland A's. Now the A's are planning to leave, also for Las Vegas, and a new stadium proposed on land near the famous Strip.
49 acres, really right across the I-15 from T-Mobile, right near Allegiant, right north of there, for a future home for the Oakland A's. We've all been in Las Vegas in the summer. It's hot. It's got to be climate controlled. We're looking at options to have it partially retractable, which I think will be pretty exciting.
Last week, the Nevada State Senate approved a bill that would provide $380 million for a new baseball stadium with a retractable roof. That should clear the A's final hurdle on making the move official. Elsewhere, stadium issues have plagued the NFL's Bears in Chicago. The Monsters of the Midway have played downtown for more than 100 years, in Soldier Field since 1971, and before that for more than half a century in Wrigley Field. But in the fall of 2021, the Bears purchased property in suburban Arlington Park for a proposed new $5 billion stadium complex. Tax issues have slowed any progress, and now another city has jumped into the mix. Waukegan, Illinois, about 45 miles north of downtown on Lake Michigan, has shown interest, joining Arlington Park, Naperville, and the city of Chicago in a battle for the Bears. New stadiums can mean new revenue, justifying the public funding. Case in point, the Atlanta Braves. The Braves had played at two different stadiums in downtown Atlanta for more than 50 years before moving to suburban Cobb County in 2017. The county committed $300 million to the new stadium project and surrounding area for restaurants and stores known as the Battery. Taxable property values there have risen from $5 million in 2014 to $736 million in 2022, making it a winner for everyone. And keep an eye on the city of San Diego, which recently lost the NFL Chargers to Los Angeles and was once home to the NBA's Clippers. Billionaire Stan Kroenke, owner of the newly crowned NBA champion Denver Nuggets, has purchased nearly 50 acres for a new project there. The plan promises housing, a hotel, a retail complex, and a new arena, which could lure either an NBA or NHL team, or both. Paul Crane, Scripps News.
All right, Paul, thanks so much. Still out on Scripps News Live, we're going to meet a little bookworm tapping into her entrepreneurial spirit.
Attention all seniors. You can now get up to $50,000 for your funeral and other final expenses, including your credit card debt, with no medical exam, starting at less than $1 a day.
Oh, honey, your dad and I can't stop talking about this baby that's coming.
We've also been thinking a lot about our future, and no matter what, we want to make sure we aren't leaving you and your family with any of our debts.
Just last week, we read that the price of a funeral can be $8,000 or more.
Wow, Jeff and I definitely would not have the money to pay for that.
And that's just a funeral. But you don't have to worry. We called, and with one phone call, we were eligible for $50,000 for our funeral and final expenses.
Well, that's great, but don't you need to take a medical exam to qualify? You and Mom have some health issues.
No, there's no medical exam, and we were able to get coverage right over the phone.
And our rates can never be increased, our benefits can never be decreased, and our coverage can never be canceled.
I'm so glad you made that call.
Don't leave loved ones with your debt. Call 800-339-7996 now and see if you qualify for up to $50,000 for your funeral and other final expenses, starting at less than $1 a day. There's no medical exam, and you can be approved even if you have pre-existing health conditions. Your rates can never be increased, your benefits can never be decreased, and your coverage can never be canceled. There's no obligation. Call 800-339-7996 now. There's no paperwork, no hidden fees, and no waiting periods. And you can start coverage right over the phone, starting at less than $1 a day. Call 800-339-7996. That's 800-339-7996. 800-339-7996.
How can a photo become a vibrant part of your home? When you go to tryfracture.com and print your images directly on glass. Get beautiful depth and clarity on a sleek frameless print that's easy to hang and looks incredible in any space. Go to tryfracture.com now to save 20% on glass prints.
This is a premium, hand-selected bacon-wrapped filet mignon that's aged for tenderness and trimmed to perfection. This is a necktie. What do you think Dad wants for Father's Day? Visit omahasteaks.com/TV to order the Dads Want Steak package today for just $99.99, and we'll include 8 additional burgers free. So get him this. Not this. This. Go to omahasteaks.com/TV today because Dad deserves it. Just a little Father's Day wisdom from Omaha Steaks.
You're watching Scripps News. Streaming everywhere, totally free. Want to see more? Grab the app on your favorite streaming platform or go to scripsnews.com to find every way to watch. Go to scripsnews.com now to find out more.
Pride Month is a time to honor the LGBTQ+ community and shine a light on its unwavering resilience. But the support for these communities doesn't stop after June 30th. Scripps News correspondent Alexa Liaco introduces us to a business owner embodying the spirit of Pride Month 365 days a year.
We really believe that books can change lives.
Karis Books and More is one of the oldest queer-owned bookstores in the United States.
We really try to have books on our shelves that you can see yourself in and that reflect the breadth of our community.
The thousands of books on the shelves represent 45 years supporting a changing community.
Back when there were no queer books, when there were no books for trans kids, there were no books for anybody sort of questioning their identity, we have had them and sought them out.
And now, decades later, this shop is buzzing with events nearly every night.
We do over 250 programs. Now that we've been able to do virtual programs, that means that people can find our programs worldwide.
The mission here, to make sure the messages of inclusion and acceptance that are celebrated during Pride last past the month of June.
We also celebrate Pride year-round because we are a queer and feminist bookstore, so that means this is what we do all the time year-round.
And that's what the store's co-owner, Sarah Look, says she hopes we all remember during Pride Month. The support given to communities during the 1 month of celebration will make an even greater impact if it's given year-round. A 2023 study from Wells Fargo found states with higher LGBTQ populations are associated with higher economic prosperity. Look says she's seen that economic prosperity grow in recent years, specifically for LGBTQ+ bookstores. And she says the prosperity is about much more than money.
About 15 years ago, there were over 120 feminist and queer bookstores in North America. And about 10 years ago, there were maybe 10 left, and now those numbers have doubled. And a lot of those stores are opening up in small towns and small towns in the South, which means that people are really being able to find community.
Community that is needed, especially now. According to U.S. Census data from 2021, the LGBTQ community is the fastest growing minority community in the United States, catching up to Latinos, African Americans, and AAPI groups. So as this community grows, so should support for all its members, Look says. It's a blossoming she's hoping to see grow the way she's seen pride grow from a small symbol to a way of life.
30 years ago, when I first got to Karis, and there was only one rainbow flag and only one rainbow sticker, and it was 50 cents. But it was such a way for people to find each other. And now I feel like it has become almost everywhere, and it more means like sometimes being an ally, or it's a queer-friendly place, which also feels important. But that also does bring me joy to just see sort of like that queer people and queer welcoming people are everywhere.
And that was correspondent Alexa Lianco reporting there for us. So summer vacation allows some kids to bury themselves in their phones, maybe play lots of video games. But one 7-year-old girl is using her free time to share her love for reading. Caroline Hogan of Scripps News Kansas City shows us.
Once upon a time, in a land far from Kansas City,
Don't put your horse in the bathtub? Why not?
there lived a girl who loved to read.
Well, every single minute of every single day, really.
She did not walk until 18 months, but she was practically reading by then.
When Abby O'Neill first discovered Little Free Libraries, she knew she wanted her own.
There are chapter books for like teenagers, and then there's grown-up books.
And when Shamrock Cabinets in Raytown heard about this chapter in her life, they wanted to be part of the story.
This is a special little girl. She's very driven.
When we're going somewhere, we usually pull in here to straighten the books. Sometimes if I have the stamps, stamp them. If they're not stamped.
Of course, it needed its own grand opening, planned and hosted by Abby.
So she brought snacks for everyone and invited the whole neighborhood. She went door to door, handing out flyers she made, inviting people. She wrote a speech. She cut a ribbon.
The smile and the hug and the card that I received from her is just like the greatest payment I'll ever get.
I felt like I was super special to have somebody build me a free little library.
And it's not just for her. It's for everyone.
Just such a phenomenal lesson for a 7-year-old that if you pour out into the people in your community, people are going to pour back into you as well.
So come one, come all. The Little Free Library's doors are open for business.
I just want it to be everywhere. Free little libraries everywhere in every state in different places.
I'm Caroline Hogan for Scripps News.
So cool. Progress is moving along on the damaged I-95 bridge in Philadelphia. Straight ahead in your next hour of Scripps News Live, we're going to take a closer look at the repairs and when officials say the bridge could now reopen. I'm Veronica Cruz. I'll be back here with you at 3 p.m. Eastern. Laura Magarino is up next after a quick break.